Hello everybody, welcome to another Primetime Funk mod video. So I had some requests recently for a couple of things. One is for a beginner steps for soldering, but I think that's going to be for another night. But one fairly simple one that seemed like I could do and bang out right away is one just talking about the type of tools that you need to have around for this fun little modding hobby. Now, I did not accumulate all of these things overnight. I had to save up and order them piece by piece, generally when it just came up to a point where I definitely needed that or I could not continue. So you can save yourself a little bit of time. I'm going to go through and studiously put the link to as many of these things as I can, or something very, very similar in the description and comments below the video. So to start out, we've got a few of my stalwarts here. So when modifying, and for my first mod specifically, it was modifying a GBA shell so I could put an IPS screen in it, because at the time they weren't really pushing the pre-modified ones much. I had not seen any listings for ones that were already pre-cut for IPS at the time, so that sort of developed over the last year. I'm sure there was a couple of places that were doing it already that I just did not know about, but this is a very simple and essential tool, the flush cutters. There are many like it, but just get yourself a good set. I honestly think I've kind of worn these ones down, so I might need to get a new set soon. But these are used for modifying shells and being able to snip something with precision. I would say this is one of the first things that I ordered, and it is one of the things that I use so frequently because I do lipo mods on the Gameboy units that I have been building to make sure they have long-lasting battery life, and having to snip away pieces of the battery bay on these the extra shells that I've been buying for these things has been super essential. So this does the lion's share of the work. Now, to clean up after that, there's a couple of things that you can use. This is just your average, some people call it an X-Acto knife. This is a craft knife that you can use to trim down the rough spots that the flush cutters leave. Now, the only thing is this isn't really super angled. So in a lot of cases, this ends up being extremely tough to be able to use long term. I've actually worn down this blade too, so I need to switch it up just for safety's sake. A sharp blade is actually going to probably save you a lot of time and effort and energy, and also will probably be safer in the end, really, because you know what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to cut well. So I'm going to switch that up in the very near future too. And then this is clearly my set of tweezers. These are made out of not metal, they're ceramic, so the whole idea is that they're not overly conductive, and also that they don't heat up as fast. So when I'm holding something to solder, like it takes a while for the heat to actually travel up this thing. So yeah, a set of ceramic ones is a good bet. I've got a few of these as well. This just happens to be my favorite set. So I'm going to put these guys away and make some room. Now, one thing that you will notice, I'm going to pan over. So I have quite the setup over here. So I have a lot of drawers where I can store these things. These are straight from the dollar store. I strapped them all together with black electrical tape, so I could make myself a fairly cheap workstation for drawers and otherwise. I need way more drawers than I have already, so that's kind of the thing. I'm gonna have to expand and maybe get some more of those in the near future. So set these guys aside and I'll bring the next things in. Now, this is a spudger. Now, this happens to be a metal one. It has got a blunt end. It has got a slightly pointed end to be able to get into those hard to reach spots. Now, I've used this for everything from prying up screens on a Game Boy that I've already sealed, but realized there is dust behind the screen. And I've used it to pat some stuff down when I see that there is like an IPS screen lifting away from the adhesive. I'll actually be able to slide in the end because it's so slim, and be able to like push down and help the adhesive work again. there's many, like a million and one uses. Now this is the package that it came with. So these are some other actual spudgers. Now if you're looking at, for example, you're taking apart your G-Pi case, even just one of these little guys, the guitar pick looking thing there, that is enough to be able to help you pop the G-Pi case apart without actually damaging the shell. That was the thing I was terrified about most when I was taking apart my G-Pi for the first time, because I did that before any of my other mods. All I was doing was switching out the directional button. The pad under there was not awesome, the one that it came with, and rattled around a lot. So I got a different one and installed it in. But these things are good for essentially just like popping things open or being able to wedge in where you don't want to damage the plastic on the shell that you've got, because it's all about the hierarchy of hardness of materials, right? So if you're actually putting this up against glass, plastic is not going to scratch glass. Metal will scratch glass, so I use this sparingly, and if I can use a plastic piece and just burn through that instead, I always try to do the plastic first, because it means that I don't have to worry about potentially damaging the shell more than necessary. So that's not to say you can't have any accidents when using one of these things to pry apart a plastic shell or to peel something away. But it's just less chance that you're going to damage it or leave a deep score mark in a new shell that way. So that is the sermon on spudgers. So we're going to put those guys aside. By the way, pretty much everything that I'm showing you tonight I bought just directly from Amazon, with one lone exception. Well, actually two, and I'll explore those as we go. Now, one of the other best friends that I have these days is this. This is my WoW stick. There are many like it, but this WoW stick is mine. Now this WoW stick actually comes with a buttload of heads that you can put on it. So that's a lot. Like, there's a lot that comes with that package. It also actually comes with its own fancy schmancy little case. So you can actually, when it doesn't have the head on it, store it in there along with one of these and take it along with you wherever you need to go. However, I've never really taken it anywhere. It just stays down here. And these I haven't yet delved into because I'm waiting to wear through the cheaper ones that I've got. And I will show you a little bit more about those in a bit. But yes, it comes with a ton of heads, so you can pretty much screw into anything. There's a joke in there somewhere, but I'm not going for it. So this is a weighted stand for it. You set it down in, it will actually keep it upright. And it doesn't really do anything else. It is just a weighted stand it comes with. Now this guy, this I have grown to love. So it is micro USB rechargeable. So anybody who's seeing that, and it does have a light on the end to show when it is in charging, and when it is full, it turns green. Now this one, of course, removable heads. This is my tri-wing. It's getting a little bit worn down. Like I said, I was actually going through some cheaper heads that I already had before I actually delved into the ones that came with the set. But this one is a mechanical screwdriver, as you can see, that has LED lights in the end, so you can actually see what you're screwing into. And then you could, of course, hit the other way to reverse. Now, the cool part with this is it's got some throttle protection on there. So it's a precision piece. If you screw in, so let's say specifically when you're taking apart your Gameboy and you want to not destroy the posts that those screws go into, and you're using some good tri-wings, when you go down in, this thing will not over tighten. It gets down to a certain resistance and it shuts off. And so if you're going to be doing some extra tightening, you actually can still turn it the remainder of the way. If you're actually going to be loosening those screws later, you turn it a couple of times and then you just hit reverse and it just pops right out of there. The end of this is slightly magnetized as well. So what I'll usually do is take it out and put it on one of the magnet pieces on my mat. So that brings us to the mat. This is a soldering mat. I got it from Amazon. It has multiple compartments. It has, more importantly, magnetized spots, so these big hot dog fingers cannot immediately lose every tiny screw that comes across. So I use the tweezers when I'm actually taking a tri-wing out of a Gameboy case. I pull it up and then I take the tweezers and I place it over onto one of these pads here. So this one has a few magnetized spots. One is over here, one is up here, and then we've got two magnetic spots there, and you can see that those are pretty well worn. There's also some other little hollows in here where you can actually just store stuff. And if you were actually doing some more complicated, like for example, taking all the screws out of a DMG front PCB panel where there's 18 million tiny little Phillips head screws, you can actually put them in their own quadrants so you can actually see where they're supposed to go. So screw position is pretty sweet. There's some measuring stuff on here as well. There's just like a simple centering area, and there's a lot of room for other tools and supplies along in here as well. So over here, there are some spots so you can actually, these are a couple of my trusty manuals. This one has a fairly thick head on it. It actually just came with one of the mod kits. Has a fairly thick head on it, so oftentimes if it's one that's slightly stripped, I can actually still use this one to take that screw out and then replace it. And then you've got just a standard Phillips head here. And then my usual suspects. So the Phillips head, which I don't use all that much, a larger Phillips head, and then I used to use this for prying, but I don't even use that anymore because I got the Spudgers. So just a flathead screwdriver. So that's the screwdriver section. So a toothbrush is handy for cleaning old Game Boy shells or old Nintendo shells. The first thing you should do before you start getting super fancy with rubbing alcohol or with let's say Retro Bright, which has caused me my fair share of heartache, is just soap, warm water, and a toothbrush. I've gotten some pretty far gone cases and shells really clean for reuse just by using the toothbrush, a little bit of soap, and some elbow grease. So toothbrush is essential. This one just happens to be pretty cool, so yeah. Now we have got the Rotary Tool, also known as a Dremel, just like a snowmobile is kind of known as a skidoo, or facial tissue is known as Kleenex. This one is a rotary tool that is powered by micro USB, so again, rechargeable. It has 3 speeds: fast, faster, and effective. Now with this one, you have multiple heads that came with it. Now, I still need to actually pick up a disc head, which will make for much easier cutting on some of my my shells. However, I haven't gotten it yet because I feel like the precision that comes from cutting a shell with the flush cutters is more gradual and means that I'm probably going to make less mistakes and not just ruin a shell as I'm going through, because you can always slow down and take your time and just take off piece by piece. If you rush ahead, you cannot put back pieces that have just flown off. So we've got a multiple sanding and buffing heads here. We've got a sanding head that I've used a little bit recently as well. And then we have multiple heads. Let's make use of the tweezers while we can. But my favorite is this one that looks like a little ball on the end. So you insert after you loosen a little bit. Oh, I guess loosen a fair bit more. Oh, there we go. Yeah, you gotta, sorry, it's just reflex. You gotta hold down on this to actually let it out, and then you hold down to tighten it, and then releasing this locks that into place. And then you have one of the more effective heads that I've ever used for this thing. You can actually clean up cuts and make stuff look better than it did when you were finished with the actual snipping. So I've actually used this to kind of cover up some mistakes in the past on previous builds and shells. But the rotary tool is really essential for being able to do a clean job on the modifications that you're doing to your shells. A lot of what I've been doing lately are lithium polymer battery upgrades, and that means you got to cut out the entire battery compartment on a Game Boy Pocket, on a well, it's mostly been Game Boy Pockets and Game Boy Colors, because I've been using the Clean Juice battery upgrades for the DMGs. But this thing is an essential tool. I don't know what it would have done without this thing. And yeah, after a little while, your workspace is pretty much drowning in Nintendo dust. But This thing takes a lot of the legwork out and makes it so that you can easily just like pare down areas that need to happen if you were doing like an IPS upgrade, or for example, you were doing a free play case and modifying the crap out of the internals of a standard GBA shell so you could fit a free play board in there. This thing would save you hours and hours of work. So the rotary tool is a must eventually. Even if you don't get it right at the beginning. I was relying just on flush cutters and craft knife for a little while, and it was okay, but once I actually used the rotary tool, there's zero way I could go back. Now keep in mind the Dremel brand are outstanding. Those ones are actually like directly powered. They don't even have like, I'm sure there's rechargeable battery versions now, but yeah, the Dremel ones, if you can get that brand at a good price, man, do that. But I am going to post the Amazon link for the one that I got because it's been treating me quite beautifully so far. Okay, now a little note about tape. I have many types of tape here. I have electrical tape. I have double-sided tape. Up top, I have just painter's tape, cheap stuff from the dollar store. I actually just use that to clean up dust on my workstation because the stuff is cheap. And then if I actually need to use it for like taping something off, I can do that. I've got duct tape, and then I've got some lighter double-sided tape up there as well. And of course, a standard set of good kitchen shears that will cut through whatever you need to do quite nicely. I often do some precision work with double-sided 3M Scotch tape. This stuff will hold your screen down, but it's not going to destroy your screen later when you do need to make a slight adjustment, because it's very rarely that it all goes on perfectly the first time. So there's the double-sided tape, there's the electrical tape. Item of note, don't use electrical tape when, for example, you are taping off a screen, for example, because you don't want bleed through. Try not to use this internally on any part of any of your Game Boy builds, because the adhesive in here over time just turns to really nasty sticky liquid, and then you're buying a thing of glue gun and hoping for the best. So vinyl tape is what you want rather than electrical tape. I've got some of that on the way myself. I actually have to remove electrical tape from a couple of my builds now that someone has filled me in on this knowledge, and replace it with black vinyl tape. Which I'm not super looking forward to, but rather than long-term consequences, I will do the work. And that brings us to Kapton tape. I bought a package that had 4 sizes. I have used all of these sizes in the past. Kapton tape is non-conductive. You can actually use it to cover up a board after you've done a lithium polymer battery upgrade and installed a Type-C USB charging board. I've used it to cover up a board with the big one. I've used the thinner ones to actually tape down free-floating wires so they're not floating around, you know, free-floating, you know what I mean. I've used it to tape down wires, and also, of course, once you actually have soldered a wire directly to a PCB, you don't want that connection wide open for anything to be able to contact it and short on it. So you put the Kapton tape over that connection as well. So use this stuff liberally. I had one kit that didn't come with, on like the back of the IPS screen, they usually have a non-conductive, non-static film. And for some reason it didn't come in one of the packages, and I ended up just covering the back of the IPS screen in Kapton tape, which did a beautiful job as well. So use this stuff liberally, because it will save you from having a random short that kills one of your devices later. I had a short happen in one of my Game Boy Colors recently. I still don't exactly know what happened, because I'm still not super proficient on the actually fixing these things end of it. I don't own a multimeter. You should probably own a multimeter while we're talking about this. But I confess I don't know what I would actually do with a multimeter once I owned it yet. So I am not an electrician, and guys like Mako and my buddy Curtis, Sam Kilgore, these are all people who actually know what the heck they're doing when it comes to like the actual electrical principles. Travis, I didn't forget you. You also know what you're doing when it comes to electrical. I'm not even going to say a novice. Rank amateur would be the better word. So use this stuff, and then you don't have to worry so much about that. So this brings us to a whole other video that we are going to get into at a later date. This is my soldering iron. So this is a really, really handy one. I bought it, and then someone who actually knows more than I do about soldering irons, hey, that's exactly the one I bought. So I was lucky because I looked it up in a shop by review. The soldering iron gets very hot. That's what it does. You use solder. I'm going to recommend the soldering iron, soldering wick, to cover up and be able to fix your mistakes, because when you apply too much solder, you can have a real bloody mess on your hands if you have no way to get rid of that. And trying to like sop it up with paper, anything, this is molten hot metal. So the soldering wick will actually, when you connect it with and apply heat, it will soak up that extra solder. So soldering wick is a must. There are other things you can do. You can just use a solder sucker. This is not one of the most effective things that I've ever used in my life, I'm not gonna lie. There are certain situations where there's like a ton of excess and it can do the job, but I'm gonna say, again, use the soldering wick. With this kit came a bunch of stuff, so like this handy bag. This is a stand that you can actually set it on. This is pretty basic. You add water to the sponge and then you can use that to get stuff off of the tip. You have the actual solder that came with it. I still don't know if this stuff is flex core, so I have really only used it once or twice. And then this is just a little bit of extra solder that a friend gave me that is flex core. I'm just coming to the end of it now after doing this hobby for about a year. So it tells you that if you're doing your job right, you're not using a ton of solder at any given time. And of course, this kit also comes with extra heads. So use as you need, but yeah, you're not meant to use the same head forever. For a fact, this one actually used to be like a fairly fine tip, much like this other one. But yeah, so there's your soldering iron. Always put even if there's no heat coming through it, I still always make sure that the muzzle is on the end there. We'll get back into soldering at a later time. Now, the next of the heavy tools, this is a cheap glue gun from Walmart. This was $7. It has been worth $7 time and time and time again. I've so gone through my $7 worth of usage on this thing. I love it. I've used it to, before I found out there were brackets for the Game Boy Color, I was actually using this to very carefully and sparingly glue down the Type-C TP4056 or 4506, whatever, the charging boards that I use on my mods. And then I found out recently that you can actually 3D print one for the Game Boy Color. So I did that recently when I was actually redoing that mod. So yeah, I just have a package of Gorilla Glue sticks for this thing. It really has one mode, and that's plugged in and on, or not plugged in, and eventually it will cool. I used this thing to fix like the chairs on our kitchen table recently because some pieces kept getting broken off because we have two small kids. So there you go. Just get yourself a decent one. This is like this was sort of like I think it was about $2 difference from the cheaper version of it, but this one's called an AdTech High Temp Project Pro. So high temp is kind of the category for that. And again, I bought this one, and someone who is much more skilled and storied than I was like, hey, that's exactly the one I've got. It was the same guy too. So we're getting down to the last bit. This, if you're going to be doing modifications where, for example, you are cutting a hole for a Type-C USB jack, Microphiles. This is a later acquisition of mine. The Microphiles are amazing because they allow you to just drill the holes that you need and then be able to carefully shape the hole so you do not destroy your mod by going a little whole hog with it. So the Microphiles, I tend to use this guy, and just the purely rounded one the most. But either way, the whole set is worth it. These ones are more for like finer filing. This is more like if you want to be able to like remove fair amounts of stuff in each push and pull. But as it is, the Microphiles are pretty essential to even, when I did my first GBA battery mod, I had to actually cut a hole in the battery door to be able to actually connect the Type-C through there to the clean juice battery that was from Handheld Legend Retro 6. So Microphiles, a great idea. Now, Q-tips and isopropyl alcohol. A few words. This is 99%. This is Life Brand. It came from the Shoppers Drug Mart, which is a big thing here in Canada. I got it because it was the 99%, and this stuff evaporates almost immediately. But this is what you are going to use if you are looking to clean out something that is actually on a PCB. So if you are looking to clean up extra flux, for example, I am not one of the guys who uses like separate flux paste, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be getting myself a flux pen in the near future. I'll talk more about that in the soldering video. But the idea is that you use flux to be able to, get the solder and be able to clean up solder. But it is a sticky mess when it's done. So you actually want to use alcohol and cotton swabs to clean that up. And honestly, alcohol and cotton swabs is the answer to so many things in this hobby. I actually got a Super Famicom game system straight from Japan, and the game that I ordered to go along with it, my one authentic Japanese game, did not work. I swabbed the contacts, I took it apart and cleaned the entire thing down with isopropyl alcohol, put it in, it did not work. I took it apart and gave it another thorough wipe down with the alcohol, and after that it works like a charm. Same with just like old games that you've got, the contacts, you can actually dab isopropyl alcohol into the power switch on a Game Boy that's malfunctioning, and it can clean the switch out if you're having trouble with the wheels. The volume or contrast wheels on your Game Boys, you can actually just use liberal amounts of isopropyl alcohol applied with a Q-tip to be able to actually, add it in and then roll those wheels until they actually run well. It just breaks up junk, and it can actually restore connections that you've got in there because it can get rid of corrosion. So a lot of times people will store an old Game Boy with the batteries in it, and then they take it apart like 8 years later or 18 years later, and they find there's a ton of battery corrosion in there. So you can actually use this to clean up the contacts. But this is like a bare essential. This is one of the first things I ever bought when I started this hobby, because everyone was like, get yourself some IPA, and that does not mean Indian Pale Ale. It means isopropyl alcohol and Q-tips, because you will need that forever and always. So, and then second last, this is a Staples can of electronics duster. Now you can get yourself something that's a little bit more long sustaining. I'm actually going to get myself a little hand pump one because I've wasted an awful lot of these cans. But being able to use canned air to blow off something or to dry up the isopropyl alcohol that you just applied is pretty valuable. And when I'm halfway through a modding activity like drilling out or dremeling out the entire inside of a GBA shell for my free play, or modifying something for another reason, being able to actually get rid of all the dust and be able to blow away a lot of the stuff that's on here is pretty essential. I'm doing a bit better because I was making a heck of a mess out of my workspace, so I just started actually using that green tape to actually like stick up the stuff that gets on here, so I'm not just blowing it all over the place and then having to vacuum manically. So canned air is one of those things that you could definitely call an essential, but you need something where you can blow stuff out. And the last thing that is actually going to take more of a role in my soldering video is this guy. So Fancy is the brand, please ignore that. Either way, this thing is an awesome tool for micro soldering. When I'm actually tinning the contacts on one of those TP4056 boards, the Type-C, to be able to use it in one of my LiPo mods, which I've done like 6 times now, I can hold it with one of the banana clips, and I can actually use the magnifying glass and see what I am doing. This actually has a light built into it as well. These are not super expensive. I tried a couple of them before. Some of them were more like a wireframe, and they were a little bit like rickety. I like that this one has a little catch-all there, because I've actually lost some pretty tiny resistors and had them just fall into there when I was actually doing a very tight in soldering job that did not go well. But this guy has been pretty invaluable in being able to like hold a board and solder something to the board, or just to be able to do micro soldering on pieces before they're joined with other pieces. I'll often actually even like attach the wires there and tin both ends of the wire, because this is a really handy little sucker. It has a spot for putting your soldering iron in, but it's kind of awkwardly placed, so I don't really love the idea of like putting it in there, because the heat will end up just melting the plastic behind. So I really never use this. I don't think I'm planning to ever use that, because I already have a stand for the soldering iron. But this thing is a pretty handy tool for your soldering. You can just peer in very, very closely, but it's not going to be super pleasant. So that's kind of it, guys. Ladies and gents, I think I've talked enough about the different tools that I have. Of course, there are more things that I have in my tool chest, in my chest of drawers. I have many drawers with many different items in there, but these are the things that I come back to time and time again, and that I've been able to build a modding hobby on. And I did not acquire all of them at once, but they're all essential in their own right. So for those who requested this particular video, I don't know if this is going to get any views other than you three, but it's still worthwhile, because I think this is one thing that I kind of wish I had been told right when I started out. So given that the modus operandi of this particular channel is to give beginners the tools they need without skipping any of the basics, because I'm still working on the basics, I think this is going to be it. So the modus operandi of this channel, yes, is to help out beginners and to help you do your installs without the initial pitfalls that I hit when I was going along the way. So good night, everybody. I hope this video finds you well, and if you do like it, yeah, hit subscribe, like the video, leave some comments. I've had a couple of my videos where people left comments that actually proved me wrong, and I welcome those, because I am still learning, and I do not claim to be the arbiter of knowledge and of the right thing. And I think that the key is being curious and being teachable, and then you can accomplish pretty much anything. So, oh geez, I forgot one more thing. Electrical wire kit. I don't know how I forgot that up until now, but I got it, so it counts. So this is wire that is divided by color, clearly, but it is also silicone covered. So that is something you will want, because when you're soldering, you do not want the plastic, or rubbery plastic in some cases, to melt away around the wire when you're actually trying to do like tiny contact solders. When you're actually soldering wire directly from a PCB onto one of the Type-C charging boards, for example, you don't want to have a lot of extra wire at the end, so you want kind of very little wire sticking out at the end, so it's not going to be an exposed contact. So you want to keep that fairly tight, and when you're soldering, you do not want that to end up being a mess of melted plastic. So this is also something that I got from Amazon and would swear by now. So I got that tip from my buddy Curtis, who has preceded me in the modding hobby. He specifically kind of sticks with DMGs, but said silicone covered wires is the way to go. So another thing that I've got coming on the way, I think I mentioned the vinyl tape a little bit earlier, but I've also got another add-on. I was using black electrical tape to cover over when I had to solder two wires together as like an extension of one of the lithium polymer batteries, and I really should have been using a sleeve instead that you put on there. You do the solder, you pull it, and then you can heat it, and it suctions onto the joint. So I will be getting myself some of those sleeves in the very near future as well, because the lithium polymer mods demand it. So okay, that's it for me. Have a great night, and happy modding. Like I said, feel free to leave feedback, leave questions. I will answer as best I can in the comments. I am not so big and powerful that I cannot answer people who ask. So have a good one.